Outer Wilds is such a fantastic game. They managed to blend the limitless creativity of space with an incredible plot about how the journey is often better than the destination. From the brilliance in its puzzle design to the originality of the planets, Outer Wilds is a perfect game from start to finish. And today, I'd like to take some time to talk about it with you. I'll not only be going over the story of Outer Wilds so you know what happened, but I'll also be analyzing and critiquing it along the way. As always, like the video if you enjoy and subscribe if you're new for more content like this. Check out my other videos if you're into video game story explanation or analysis. Thank you to my returning viewers for coming back to another video, and without further ado, let's get started. Outer Wilds first begins with you waking up from a brief nap underneath the night sky. We learn from talking with an NPC named Slate that today is launch day. We are a Hearthian and are about to be the next one of our species to go to space. To do so, we must get the launch codes from a previous explorer named Hornfels. Before you set off, it's encouraged that you explore the village. Outer Wilds wants you to interact with what's around you, as this is where they hide the tutorial. Talking with Mika lets you fly a model ship, which will help you learn how to control your ship. Galena and Tefra want to play hide and seek and can be found following the frequencies on your signal scope. And Gosan wants you to repair a broken part in the mineshaft, teaching you how repairs work on your ship while also letting you grapple with the physics of zero-G. The game continues to hide even more of its tutorials inside the observatory. There are gravity crystals that change the gravity of an area, display cases for a scout launcher and an anglerfish, different stages of a supernova, a mysterious shard that teleports when you look away from it, weird writing written on a slab of stone, and a picture of a radio tower just outside the village. It won't make sense now, but everything you'll need to know about the game and the world could be found in this very room. It's a great way of consolidating all the important info into one place in case the player forgets, while also helping them navigate the world more easily, as they'll be able to recall their visit to the observatory when they come across these same objects out in the solar system. Once you're all set and feel like you've seen everything there is to see, you can grab the codes, find a statue that consumes your memories that will definitely not be relevant later, start the launch sequence, and explore the Outer Wilds. Usually, around this time, I would explain the plot's basic premise, as games often try to hook the player in immediately with some kind of backstory. But that's not the case here. Outer Wilds is a game about exploring the vast world of the game's solar system, so that's all the hook you need, as providing a plan or a goal takes away from the point of space travel. Even in our world, researchers and astronomers analyze and explore space for various reasons, so it's only right that Outer Wilds offers complete freedom from the get-go. Now, there is a main quest, a central plot that the game will inevitably nudge you towards, but the game will once again let you handle that at your own pace. Before we set out on our journey though, I want to offer a spoiler warning, and if you've watched the channel before, you know I don't give that out often. The last time I did this in a video that wasn't about a newly released game was for Soma, and the reasoning is the same. Outer Wilds is often described as a game you can only play once, and having now beaten the game, I can agree with that statement. Outer Wilds is core parts of the exploration and the puzzle that is the main quest. Once you uncover these secrets for the first time, you'll never be able to experience them the same way again. Whether that be learning about the planets and how they function, or what the mysteries the solar system has in store. These are things you can only experience once, and by watching this video, I will have robbed you of that experience. So if at any point throughout the video you become even mildly interested in the game, pause the video, beat the game, and come back. This video will always be here, your first experience will not be. And speaking of first experiences, thanks to the game's freedom, choosing a destination might be a hard decision. With so many choices at your fingertips, which planet should you choose? Honestly, it doesn't really matter, as regardless of where you go, you'll be greeted by some of the most creative concepts I've ever seen from a space game before. I've never mentioned this on video before, but I love space. I've always been enamored by the sheer mystery of the thing and always wanted to learn more about it. Unfortunately, I was born too late to explore a planet and born too early to explore our solar system, so landing on another planet in my lifetime seems like a pipe dream. Still, that never killed my fascination with this far-off distant land of ours. Space as a setting is a creative goldmine, as the potential is limitless. Due to its confusing origin and unknown size, space can be whatever you want it to be. As said by Star Trek in its opening crawl, space is a place with new planets, life, civilizations, and the place where no man has gone before. Space allows for unprecedented creativity, and even if you manage to go too far, you still wouldn't be able to reach the creative edges of the universe. Outer Wilds understands this perfectly, as the team decided to make some of the most original and bizarre planets I've ever seen. The solar system of Outer Wilds has 10 celestial bodies, encompassing both planets, moons, and a comet that the player can land on and explore. Each of these planets has tons of aspects that set it apart from every other planet, be it design, mechanics, or hazards. Our home planet, Timber Hearth, and its moon, Addle Rock, are quite basic, as they're meant to mimic the Earth and Moon. Right behind it, though, is Brittle Hollow, a name derived from its brittle surface and hollow core. Its moon, Hollow's lantern, lights up the sky with giant fireballs that spawn from multiple active volcanoes which rain down on the surface, eventually causing the surface to collapse into the planet. Waiting for you at the bottom is a literal black hole. Quite possibly the last thing I expected to be down there. Those curious, or unfortunate enough to fall into the black hole, will be shot out at a white hole at the edge of the solar system. Ash and Ember Twin are often called the Hourglass Twins because they not only orbit around each other, but they also pass the sand of Ash Twin between themselves. After enough time, Ember Twin will fill itself starting from the core, and Ash Twin will lose its mass as it gets smaller and smaller. This provides a very unique circumstance depending on the planet. Ash Twin has multiple structures resting underneath the sand, so you have to wait for them to fully emerge. While this happens, Ember Twin is being filled up with sand. Numerous caves that provide interesting secrets and discoveries will be filled over time, so you have to hurry or else be trapped within them. Giants Deep, on the other hand, is a massive planet covered in 95% water. The planet only has 4 islands, but if you've done a loop around the entire planet and still haven't found all 4, well, there's a reason for that. See, the cyclones that patrol the waters can end up meeting with an island. If they do, the island will be shot into the atmosphere, only to then come crashing down a bit later. Small plates on the islands act as tubes that prevent you from the elements, so it's advised that you get in one as soon as possible. Dark Bramble, however, is one of the more stranger planets in the solar system solely due to how it functions. While the planet seems rather small, it's actually the biggest in the system. Inside the core is a web of interconnected nodes that shoots you to different parts of the planet. The bright lights are meant to act as guides to help you navigate the fog, but these lights can also be the lights of giant anglerfish that will eat your ship in one bite. You aren't out of the woods just yet despite finding a node, however, as oftentimes they lead you to a dead end or in some cases keep you in a perpetual loop. By far the best planet in the game, though, is easily the Quantum Moon. Do you remember that shard at the observatory, the one that teleports when you look away from it? Take that and expand that to a moon. The Quantum Moon will continually move around when it escapes your view, and even if you manage to keep your eye on it, trying to land on it is impossible as you'll just fly right through. These are the basic outlines of the planets, and frankly, I think they speak for themselves. Each one has such a unique touch applied to it that it makes them stand out from the rest. And honestly, they could have just stopped here. This was already enough to solidify itself as a great space game, but the team knew they could go further with this concept, as the planets and hazards either create or become their own puzzle. In Outer Wilds, the name of the game is exploration and puzzles. Everything you do in this game contributes to the story, as the objective is to explore the solar system, so figuring out how to overcome these planets is a major part of the story. The anglerfish are a great example. The twist is that the fish are blind, so as long as you don't make noise, they won't attack you. To find this out, you'll either have to experiment yourself or find the solution within the solar system. Within the many caves of Ember Twin is a small underground settlement called the Sunless City. Nearby are the bones of an anglerfish. According to the text near its body, the kids that used to live here played a game where one person was the anglerfish and the other people lined up against the wall. When they would say go, they would rush to the other side of the room and hoping to not get caught. If you did, you become the next anglerfish. A recent rule change was implemented into the game, which is that the anglerfish must wear a blindfold. One of the kids was confused why the rules were changing, and that's because one of the kids' aunts said that anglerfish are blind. So from a small children's game, we were able to uncover the weakness of the anglerfish. Another great example will be the Quantum Moon. On Giants Deep is a massive cyclone located on the North Pole. If you go up and over it, you'll find a hidden building called the Tower of Quantum Trials. The previous species that used to live here built this as a test, to see if the participants are ready to embark on their journey to the Quantum Moon. If you'd like to see the moon for yourself, then you'll need to pass the trial as well. The first level teaches the basics of quantum objects and how looking away and turning back changes their position. The trial then amps up the difficulty by having the gate blocked by a wall. It's impossible to walk to the gate without it teleporting somewhere else. But the podium says that pictures can also have the same effect. So you must take a picture of the gate, and while it's still up, walk towards the gate and it will remain in its place. This method can be applied to the Quantum Moon. Shooting out your scout and taking a picture of the planet freezes it in space, letting you land on its surface. While these are just a couple of examples, I can assure you that most of the puzzles are solved in this manner. On paper, they seem relatively easy. Yeah, the Quantum Trials helps with the Quantum Moon. Who would have thought? But where the brilliance comes in is how the game presents this to you. Inside your ship is a ship log that catalogs all the useful information you find, fit with arrows and lines that show how each mystery connects. But all the info is worded as a statement, saying things like, observing an object and observing the image of an object. These are the same. This was from the Tower of Quantum Trials, and is a reminder that taking a picture of a quantum object stops it from moving, which is how we land on the Quantum Moon. The game never says that this place or its information is important. You have to infer that this is connected to the problem you've been trying to solve, just like the anglerfish cave on Ember Twin. The game will graciously provide you with all the info you could ever need, but it's up to you to figure out why it's relevant. It doesn't take a complete hands-off approach like a more difficult puzzle game might, but it doesn't reveal the solution to you without your input. Solving the puzzle is half the game, and Outer Wilds wants to help you. It's not going to leave you out to dry, but it's not going to give it to you on a silver platter either. It wants you to feel the joy of solving the puzzle without spoiling it for you. From all this, it's pretty easy to see that Outer Wilds understands the limitless potential that space can provide to a story. as they decided to go balls to the wall with their ideas by making space something truly alien. It's why Timber Hearth, despite being rather basic, serves as a great foil for the rest of the solar system. The simplicity of Timber Hearth somehow amplified the nature of the other planets, as my very first taste of Outer Wilds was this, a very basic earthy planet. It gave me some very basic expectations regarding the game and its solar system, only to have those expectations broken once I visited the very next planet. In a full indie presentation, Alex Beachum, the director behind the game, talked about various parts of Outer Wilds' design, some of which I'd like to highlight, as he perfectly explained why Outer Wilds feels so good to explore. He says that he wanted the players to explore because they were curious. Outer Wilds has no skill system, weapons, or upgrades. Alex felt that these would provide incentive to explore when the only incentive he wanted was for the player to be curious about the world. And by removing everything in pursuit of that, he knew that if anyone made it past the 2-hour mark and actually stuck with the game, they were here because they were curious. This sheer openness and level design can feel overwhelming to some, however. While I prefer a hands-off approach to my games, I do enjoy having my hand held. Alex knew that hand-holding would ruin the point of the game, so accounted for this by trying to encourage the player to create their own objective. At the observatory is that NPC named Hornfels, who will ask you what you plan on doing once you get to space. Do you want to explore the stars, find the previous species, uncover unknown mysteries, or just simply hang out and relax? This gives the player the choice to choose what they want to do instead of letting the game choose for them. The objective is more personal this time, and Alex found that playtesters ended up doing exactly what they chose. He also mentions that he wanted the puzzles to be across the solar system. He wanted to prevent what he called mowing the lawn, where players would scan every nook and cranny of a planet before moving on to the next. To accomplish this, they made the landscapes of the planets protrude out more, while removing anything interesting from the places that aren't important. You'll quickly notice that if there isn't a large landmass on Timber Hearth, then it's just flat green grass. This does make it so 70% of the planet is a flat plane, but it prevents the player from mowing the lawn, as they'll quickly realize that only the points of interest are important. This is the core of Outer Wilds, letting you explore the solar system at your own pace. It's why Outer Wilds has stuck with so many people, as they were the target audience. It's not a game that will be a hit for everyone, but for those that it resonates with, the potency of its design perfectly fits their needs, making it not just another space game, but one of the best space games of all time. It would be a real shame if something were to happen to this beautiful place we found ourselves in. So, there's a lot to unpack here. Firstly, yes, the sun exploded. Like all stars within the universe, each one has a natural endpoint that eventually leads to them going supernova. That just so happens to be the same day we were sent into space. The following scene was not us returning to a previous checkpoint, but rather returning to the very beginning of the day. We are stuck in a 22-minute time loop, which ends when the sun goes supernova and destroys the solar system. The game helpfully gives you an indicator to show how close the sun is to exploding. A display at the museum shows the different stages of the sun, and music will start to play right when it enters its last moments. This becomes one of the main plot threads throughout the game. The ship log that catalogs all the information you find is split into 4 different topics, or what the dev team calls curiosities: the vessel, Ash Twin Project, orbital probe cannon, and the quantum moon. Each of these threads will start as a simple collection of notes, before eventually becoming a convoluted web of ideas, where we try to figure out where the time loop is coming from and where the solar system's biggest mystery is: the eye of the universe. To uncover all this, we'll need some assistance. The other spacefaring members of the Outer Wilds Ventures are out there enjoying their lives and can offer some insight into what they found on their respective planets. But the real source of info will come from the solar system's previous inhabitants, the Nomai. All across the planet and moons of Outer Wilds are the remnants of the Nomai, a species that no Hearthian has come in contact with. The only shred of info the Hearthians have is that they look like goats, as a Nomai statue was discovered in an abandoned settlement. This is the same statue that takes our memory, so it's clear that the time loop and the Nomai are intrinsically linked. A Hearthian here at the museum, Hal, has also given us a translator that we can use to scan the Nomai writing. With this translator and a little bit of know-how, we'll be able to uncover anything that Nomai have talked about. Unfortunately for us, they do a lot of talking. What you'll immediately notice about the Nomai though is how resourceful they are. Anything found on any of the planets that isn't our own is the work of the Nomai. They created the large orbital cannon found on Giant's Deep, the warp core structures on Ash Twin, and the underground civilizations under Brittle Hollow. They were even able to overcome all the hazards that the solar system throws at you. The force fields on Giant's Deep that protect you from the cyclones were created by them. They built a station near the white hole that can teleport you back to Brittle Hollow just in case you fall into the black hole, and they somehow managed to live on Ember Twin despite the sand encasing their homes. The only place they haven't been able to settle is Dark Bramble, but to be fair, no one else has either, and that place is hostile to pretty much everything. Given the aforementioned discoveries, it's no wonder they were able to survive this long and are considered by the Hearthians to be far more advanced than them. Their writings corroborate this, as the Nomai were a highly advanced and widespread species that were split off into clans. Each of these clans lived on a vessel, a large ship that transported them to different systems. Every 10 years, these clans would come together at a festival and share their greatest discoveries. There doesn't seem to be any incentive to win the festival though, as the species benefits either way. However, for our clan of Nomai, their goal was much larger. They realized that this signal was sent from what they would call the Eye of the Universe. What makes this special is that it's somehow older than the universe itself. Leaving little time to question what it was, their sense of discovery took over and was how they managed to make it to our solar system. The rest of the story will have to be discovered with the help of our ship log. The first curiosity is the location of their vessel. I first heard of the vessel when coming across an escape pod on Brittle Hollow. Nearby was a recording from a Nomai assessing the situation. Everyone seemed to be okay, but they noticed that the volcanic moon was coming back around, so they all decided to seek refuge underground. We also learned that there are 2 other escape pods and that we now have a new frequency added to our signal scope. These frequencies take us to Ember Twin and Dark Bramble. Same as before, there are recordings defined at each location that relay a bit about the crew's thoughts about the impact. The escape pod in Dark Bramble though is what leads us to the vessel. If you follow the trail of lights left by the survivors, you'll stumble across this crew's final resting place. They followed the vessel's signal and discovered that it was inside this plant, but they didn't know where to go from there. To get there ourselves, we have to shoot a scout from our launcher into the plant and then follow its signal through the nodes, and eventually we'll find the remnants of their vessel. When the signal from the Eye of the Universe hit their systems, the Nomai warped there immediately. This seems to be the cause of the problem, as instead of going to the Eye, they were stuck inside Dark Bramble. That's when the escape pods went out, but only one seems to have safely landed. This ended up stranding them on this solar system as they never communicated with other Nomai clans about their plans. So no one knows where they ended up, and even though they can hear the calls from them, they can't send out any themselves. Leaving them with little choice, the rest of the surviving members decided to make the most of it and see this plan through to the end, leading to the creation of the orbital probe cannon and the Ash Twin project. Much of the investigation around the probe cannon will be here in Giant's Deep, as the construction yard is where it was initially built, and to make things easier, the cannon is still orbiting the planet. The problem is that it's broken and one of the modules is missing. We could use a projection stone from one of the intact modules to see that the missing probe module seems to be in some dark place surrounded by lightning, and the only place that fits that bill is the core of Giant's Deep. Inside the core is the probe module, which gives us the coordinates to the Eye of the Universe. When the Nomai first started establishing themselves on the land, they tried to search for the signal again, only to come up short. They used various different eye locators, and while they were successful at documenting the planets, the eye was still left unfound. This forced them to pivot to another method. If they can't find it through radio waves, then they'll have to find it the old-fashioned way. The plan was to construct a probe launcher that would take pictures of the universe and hope that after enough time they would find proof of it somewhere in the system. Even then, the chances of finding something that could be as small as a rock for all they know in this vast ocean of black would be next to impossible. So to heighten their chances, they started development on the Ash Twin project. Out of the past 3 curiosities, the Ash Twin project is likely the one you hear of first, as almost every conversation within this game is about this top secret project. When crafting the White Hole Station, they came across a strange phenomenon. Anyone who enters the warp core in the station arrives at its destination before that person actually enters. You can see this yourself anytime you use the station, as the arrival time is strangely before the entering time. The time difference is admittedly rather insignificant, only delay of 100,000th of a second, but still that means we traveled back in time, if only briefly. This data was then sent over to the High Energy Lab on Ember Twin to study, and they discovered that by adding more energy to the warp core they could extend the time to seconds and possibly minutes. This led to them testing out the possibility of a 22-minute time delay, the same length as the time loop. But that number is rather specific, don't you think? As humans, we usually say whole numbers when making generalizations or assumptions, like 10, 15, or 20. 22 seems oddly specific. While there is no direct answer, I've come up with a few ideas. Simply put, 22 minutes is an adequate amount of time for the time loop. The probe cannon has to shoot a physical probe into the solar system. They have to account for travel time, debris, and speed, so 22 minutes is likely the time it takes to reach the edge of the solar system. The Nomai don't want to end the loop too early, or they'll be missing vital data, but too long and they're wasting precious time that could be spent shooting another probe. So 22 minutes seems to be the sweet spot. Even mechanically it fits nicely too. If the time loop is too short, then the loops would feel too fast, forcing you to dedicate one loop to one specific task. Put it too long and the time loop doesn't feel as threatening. There needs to be a middle ground where the game can give you enough time to explore some of the planet while still feeling pressured to speed it up a little, and 22 minutes seems to be that number. The Nomai quickly realized that the energy required for this 22-minute time interval would have to be man-made, and determined that a sun-going supernova would be sufficient enough power. While the Nomai assumed it would be possible, they were hesitant to go through with this, as if they screwed this up, that'd mean the death of an entire solar system, and they weren't willing to have that emotional baggage with them. But here is where the Ashtorm project and the Sun Station were born. The Sun Station was created to preemptively cause the Sun to supernova, and the Ashtorm project was to become the creator of the time loop. Inside the project are multiple goat masks, similar to the ones we see at every loop. This mask stores our memories every time the loop ends, and these statues are what caused this to happen. The statues were made to bond with one Nomai, so one statue could be assigned to each. Since the same day is looping, the Nomai would be none the wiser, but the masks were designed to warn them of the loop, whether the project either succeeded or failed. As you enter the project though, you'll notice that 3 masks are lit up, implying that there are 3 people that have retained their memories. One of them is us, with the others being the probe, and one of the other explorers Gabbro. This is quite the revelation at the time, as he's the only NPC to mention the supernova and the constant dying that ensues. The reason we were chosen is due to the nature of the time loop. When the Nomai tried to force the sun to go supernova using the Sun Station, it failed. It couldn't create enough energy to generate the outcome they wanted, so they shelved the project for the time being while they focused on the Interloper, a comet that just recently entered the atmosphere. The reason why the supernova happens then is because the sun naturally hit the end of its life, and this is where the next revelation starts to sink in. We've been living this day for a very, very long time, and have only recently realized it. Each time the time loop resets, the probe cannon fires off a probe in some random direction in hopes of finding the eye of the universe. Once the probe finally finds its target, the statues would awaken, bond with the nearest person to them, and start storing their memories. We just so happened to be near the statue when the probe was found, and Gabbro has a statue on his island who is the closest being to that one. So the real death of the sun unintentionally kicked off the project. But how long has this been going on? Well, according to the canon, probe 9,318,054 was the one that found the eye. Doing a bit of math by multiplying that number by 22 comes out to around 389 years since the time loop first began. So for almost 4 centuries, we've been reliving the same day over and over with no recollection of it. That is a lot to take in. It's bad enough that the time loop was happening, but to learn that it was already happening is quite a shock, even if we don't experience these moments for ourselves. But once again, we end up right back at the beginning regarding the fate of the Nomai. Where did they go if they weren't a part of the loop? The answer is quite simple and rather sad. Once the comet came into orbit, they sent a team up there to investigate. One of them made it inside and found that the core was made of a deadly green substance. They went to warn their fellow Nomai only for the core to rupture. Scattered across the solar system are small green shards. These are the remains of that core, and from them comes ghost matter, an extremely toxic substance that can kill you instantly. The Interloper carried this ghost matter with it, which exploded from its core, rained down on the nearby planets, and killed every Nomai left. Unfortunately, giving us the cause of the death of the system's long-forgotten species. Despite that, there might still be a way to not only find them, but even communicate with one, which leads us back to the Quantum Moon. The Nomai quickly realized that unlike every other planet in the system, the Quantum Moon always drops you near the South Pole. No matter what direction you come from, you will always land in the Southern Hemisphere. One member of the species seems to have found a workaround. There are a lot of Nomai names that are thrown at the player, and I'll admit I don't remember very many of them. One that did stick with me was named Solanum. They were the only one of their species to ponder about the eye and what it means, instead of seeing it as just another mystery that has to be discovered. Solanum wondered if the signal was intentional or just a part of the planet, questioning whether the signal was meant for the Nomai or just so happened to be picked up by them. It's a rather important question, as the Nomai don't even know what this thing is, only that it's something that they haven't seen before. Regardless of what the species assumed, they were still dedicated to finding the eye. So it's not like these thoughts affected their efforts, Solanum included, as she did eventually make it to the Quantum Moon only to die shortly after. Her corpse is not far from the landing zone, but what is strange is that it's not the only corpse. The Quantum Moon is everyone's moon in that it orbits all the planets and seems to take the form of those planets. Landing on the Quantum Moon near Giant's Deep will see the ground replaced with water, but arrive while it's on Timber Hearth and now the environment has changed. but if it's everybody's moon, where did it come from? To solve this puzzle, they created an eye locator signal that tracks the quantum moon's movements. That's when they learned that the moon goes to a secret sixth planet far away from the solar system. This to them must be the eye of the universe, but to get there we have to employ the final quantum rule. A quantum object will move when not in focus. This is true, but if the individual touches said object and ceases observation, they will travel with the object. On the surface is a large tower built by the Nomai. Closing the door and flicking the lights on and off lets us teleport to different planets, as we're losing sight of the moon but still in bounds of the tower, and thus travel with the moon. If you do this at the North Pole, eventually you'll gain access to the Secret Sixth location. So Solanum is alive after all. Well, not to burst your core, but not quite. Solanum is dead on every version of the moon except this one. When the interloper core exploded, Solanum was already on the quantum moon, but due to its weird time manipulation, it was and wasn't in every location. Solanum is dead on the other quantum moons, just not on this quantum moon, because the eye of the universe was so far away from the solar system that the ghost matter never reached it. She is both alive and dead, a very troubling fate to have for someone who is the last of their clan. When you approach, she creates runes that you can use to communicate with. Now, assuming you aren't like me and definitely did not think this was a matching puzzle of some kind and wasted an entire loop trying to fit these runes in different spots, she'll ask you to take these runes and place them on an altar to understand what you want her to say. She can't speak our language, so the only workaround is to place these runes and then translate her text. Using, say, the explain and you runes has her explain herself and her people. Solanum surmises that if the moon is quantum, then the eye of the universe must be too. In fact, its quantum state was likely a result of it being within proximity to it for so long. On Timber Hearth is a small forest that includes a quantum shard. If you look carefully though, you'll notice that the trees are exhibiting the same quantum properties as the shard. From this, we can assume that these quantum properties spread after enough time, and that the moon was originally just a moon before it became infected with the quantum energy from the eye. Solanum also shares her thoughts on the fundamental uncertainties within the eye, saying, quote, "The quantum moon probably exhibits macroscopic quantum behavior because of its proximity to the eye. Shards that broke off from the quantum moon have a similar effect, as I imagine you've seen elsewhere in this star system. Conscious observation forces a quantum object to collapse into a single possibility, but what would happen if a conscious observer somehow entered the eye itself? Over time, this has become my clan's greatest question." Solanum seems to imply that these quantum objects have fixed points, but looking at the object merges these points. To use the shard at the museum as an example, this object will only ever travel to these three locations. When we look at it, it stays at one of these three places and never moves. It is both present and not present in these locations. It's like spawn points in a multiplayer game. The shard can spawn in one of three places. We're only able to see one of them though, as that one becomes the active spawn point, while the others are removed once it catches our gaze. That's why Solanum is drifting between life and death. The other quantum moon spawn points were hit with the ghost matter because they're still there. Going off this, she hypothesizes then what would happen if we did this to the eye of the universe. If we can collapse all the spawn points of the shards and moon into one place just by observing them, what would happen to the eye? I mean, if that ain't some of the coolest stuff you've ever heard, I don't know what is. Somehow this game had me more intrigued than ever, as now I really wanted to figure out what this eye of the universe was. But while the eye became my eventual interest, I started this game with the interest in the Nomai. They are such a cool little species to me. They started off as this ancient legend, a mysterious species that conquered the stars only to be snuffed out by some unknown force. Only to realize by the end that they're no better than we are, just a species of spacefaring goats. Over on the YouTube channel Nothing Ventured, the owner Logan Lamont interviewed the dev team in his own documentary. Part of the video focused on the lead writer Kelly Beachum, who wrote much of the Nomai's history and the text logs you find throughout the solar system. She says that she explicitly wanted the Nomai to be less cryptic, less like an ancient religious order and just a species into space. It ruins the mystery, sure, but it also grounds them, making them feel human, as ironic as that is. She wanted the Nomai to also feel overwhelming in terms of their personalities. They're very eager to discover the universe and are easily distracted, reinforced by how they immediately halted progress on the sun station the moment the interloper entered the atmosphere. This chaotic nature was also meant to translate to their writing. These long branching text strings are meant to feel like strings of words, where everyone was sharing ideas and talking about different things at the same time. That's why some of the dialogue is often irrelevant. While others are deep in research, a Nomai is seen flirting with another, others are playfully insulting each other, and some are just talking about what's on their mind. It all feels natural, shedding away the idea that there's some group of higher beings and are really just a species with a major interest in space. Despite being determined to uncover any mystery they come across, you'll find that the Nomai are very respectful of the land they live on. The Nomai came to Timber Hearth so they could produce strong enough metals for the Ash Twin project. While digging, they found a new aquatic species and determined that their work would harm their ecosystem, thus deciding that moving to a different mine would be beneficial. Text in a mural near the surrounding area revealed that this was about the Hearthians, and that this was their original form before they evolved into land-based creatures. The Nomai seemed fascinated by them. Like watching tadpoles swimming in a tank, they were in awe at their design, wondering how they move and what their fourth eye does. It almost feels comforting to hear this information, that there was an intergalactic species keeping tabs on us since the early days to make sure we survived. It's an interesting subversion of their personalities, as they seem like the species that would raise the planet to achieve their goal, but instead they are very respectful, able to see the beauty of nature and all that it provides. You'll see this a lot in their writing. They describe the vessel as having a mortal injury instead of just simply saying that it was broken. Solanum even mentions how the quantum moon welcomes its visitors on the South Pole, as if the moon is like some person inviting people to their home. The Nomai respect the solar system because it's not theirs, and they realize that the world is much more packed than it seems. Life is all around us. It's not just the planets or the species who inhabit them, but the rocks, trees, and minerals. Everything serves a purpose in this world and is equally as important to the solar system's health. That's why the Nomai exist all across the solar system, but only where they need to. Their presence on Timber Hearth is minor, only by the mine near the village. This mine is pivotal to their work, as the ore will help construct the Ash Twin project. Their homes on Brittle Hollow exist underground to protect themselves from Hollow's lantern, and the Black Hole Forge was made to craft the warp cores they need to travel across the solar system. Every location has a purpose, just as every being and structure has a life. It even extends to the names of the species. Many of the Nomai are named after plants, like Coleus, Cassava, and Solanum, while Hearthians are named after rocks, like Feldspar and Chert. It's almost like the game designers too wanted to convey that life is everywhere in the world. It doesn't just have to be a mammal to be considered a part of life. This characterization even applies to the designs of their civilizations. Back to that documentary, Logan also interviewed art director Wesley Martin. Martin explains that the specific designs he crafted were meant to reflect the different generations of Nomai. The vessel and escape pods have a sort of smooth flow to them. They're more rounded and curved, unlike their abandoned settlements, which are more sharp and square. He says that this was to show how the species was in survival mode, focusing more on function than form due to the limited resources of the planet. The locators of the eye have also evolved over the generations. The first was rather primitive, requiring you to put a ball in one of the slots so the locator knows which planet to find, along with panels being moved to highlight the planet's movement. The newer, more advanced version doesn't require the ball and automatically tracks each planet without input. The panels have also been removed to provide a more pleasant viewing experience. So just through its design, the game is able to portray the attitudes and opinions of the Nomai and show how the species has evolved, which is all completely dependent on the player's sense of discovery. But our talk with Solana finally provides us with the last piece we needed. We've been able to answer every question about the solar system, the Nomai, their death, the quantum moon, and the eye of the universe. Everything except the signal. The Nomai came here because of the signal, and yet were never able to hear it again. Why couldn't they find it? Why couldn't we find it? And more importantly, where did it come from? A few years after release, The Outer Wilds received its one and only DLC called Echoes of the Eye, and it answers that very last question. To separate the content, the DLC has its own location, both on the planetary map and on the ship log. Personally, I like to play DLCs after I've beaten the main game, or at least up until the point of no return. This helps organize recordings as it separates the content into its own file instead of just slotting it in somewhere else. But I do think playing that way is wrong, and that the DLC is at its best when played along with the rest of the game. To start the DLC, you must visit a radio tower located just outside the village, so there's a very real chance that the first thing you learn about this world is through the DLC. In fact, that's what happened to me. Thankfully, I was too stupid to understand what it wanted me to do, so I never got past that part until later. But this shows that the dev team wanted to keep this experience as seamless as possible. They didn't want this to be viewed as extra content, something you do at the end or right before it. It's supposed to be just another mystery you solve along with the rest of them. This in turn helps you feel less fatigued by the journey. Sometimes you become so stuck on a puzzle that you need to do something else to clear your mind. The DLC then acts as another lead to investigate in the meantime. Nothing seems out of the ordinary once you step inside the tower, until you listen to the recording on the table. The deep space satellite the Hearthians used to photograph their solar system was taking various pictures at different angles. One seemed to trouble the observer these images, so they asked Feldspar to see if the radar dish was broken. Look at the images and you might come to the same conclusion. When it was at a 40-degree angle, it seemed to capture another planet, this black spot in front of the sun. It can't possibly be one of the old planets as all are accounted for. There's Giant Steep and the Interloper at the bottom. Dark Bramble, Brittle Hollow, and Hollow's Lantern are at the top. Timber Hearth and Outer Rock are together, and the Quantum Moon is right next to the Hourglass Twins. So, what the hell is that? Well, bringing up the map, we can find the satellite and find that black spot at 40 degrees. Speeding towards it reveals an interesting secret. It's a ship right in the middle of the solar system, just sitting here hidden from the world. But that's not all the ship has in store for us. I have to admit I was speechless when I first entered this place. It was nothing at all like I expected. Here in the middle of space is a hidden oasis. A continuous cycle of flowing water occasionally overtaken by rows of cabins. We must ask though, what is it doing here? That becomes the explicit question at the heart of the DLC. Why is this here, and who inhabits it? Unlike the main game where the Nomai were hard to find, you're able to find these guys fairly easily. Not like in person, or alive, but there are paintings of the inhabitants and throughout the map are campfires with dozens of bodies surrounding them. This species doesn't have a name, but I've taken to naming them after their ship and just calling them the Strangers. What's initially quite strange about the ship, despite its entire existence, is how the species is only seen near these campfires. The Nomai bodies were spread across the solar system, all in different positions and places, but the Strangers all seem to have perished here. These campfires they sit near serve a deeper purpose than just being able to roast marshmallows though, as dozing off transports the player into the dream realm. This is meant to be the species' home away from home. Ideally, the player would have seen this place within the burned reels left in the overworld, encouraging them to find a way in. One of these campfires is located under the water in a locked vault, which is strange enough to get the player to question why it's here. The Dream Realm also carries the same reels seen earlier but without any burn marks. So the two mysteries at play here is the vault and the search for those untouched reels. Getting them requires you to find the forbidden archive of each location, which is unfortunately easier said than done. This DLC felt like it was an attempt to make the puzzles more challenging now that most of the core audience has gotten past the base game, as I've never struggled more in this game than here in the DLC. Part of the reason why is the fact that the Dream Realm is pitch black, with the lantern being your only light source, which, as you can see, doesn't light very much. I struggled just trying to find my footing in these areas, let alone solve a puzzle. In fact, for a while I had no idea there was a puzzle to be solved. Your ship log does a great job of cataloging your discoveries and will even mark areas with a yellow asterisk when you visited a location but haven't found everything you need. None of these areas had the marking when the loop reset, so I assumed that I finished everything I needed to, and that the Dream Realm was designed to have a deeper meaning and not a puzzle. Somehow it got worse when I had to actually solve those puzzles. One of the archives is hidden in this small building. Inside are the Strangers who will force you to wake up if spotted, so you have to avoid their gaze if you want to proceed. However, there is a bigger issue at play. I want to say about halfway through the loop the dam will break and the built-up water will tear down most of the structures in its way. The first campfire located at the river lowlands will be covered in water, and if you're sleeping at the campfire when the dam breaks, it'll kick you out of the dream. The solution is to go to another campfire, one that hasn't been extinguished by the dam, and then take a raft to the previous area. This kills the Strangers but leaves you alive as you aren't plugged into their campfire. It sounds simple when I say it out loud, but I can't tell you how long that took me to figure out. Getting my second set of slides was surprisingly simple. Starlight Cove is just a single elongated puzzle, as the village has various pathways and a few hazards to avoid, like these statues that will wake up if the bells ring enough times. It's the third one that was awful. The third and final location is the Endless Canyon. You can navigate the manor without much issue, only to be blocked by a door that will only open when the lights are off. The whole DLC uses this similar puzzle structure, and it's actually something I found quite neat. Many puzzle games often have the player find objects to interact with in order to solve puzzles, and while Outer Wilds certainly has that, many of the solutions are solved using your current toolkit. Taking a picture of the Quantum Moon doesn't require you to find a camera, but to use the built-in camera attached to your scout launcher. Many Nomai contraptions are vision-based, requiring you to guide an object with your eyes, and the Strangers have puzzles based on light. Rafts, doors, hidden walkways, all of it can be revealed by light or the absence of it. This one is a personal favorite of mine as it introduces two mechanics at once. There is a light lock door like many of the ones you've likely seen, except you can't get inside. But there is a hole that's big enough for your scout launcher to peek through, which happens to also produce light. So you have to keep taking pictures until it's on the symbol and then recall the scout before it goes too far. It's neat because it's just the right fit. Not too similar to the Nomai, making puzzles too easy, but not too difficult or out of place where it requires a completely different mechanic to understand. Turning off these lights in the manner reveals the door, but also wakes the strangers who now patrol the halls. This forces you to sneak around them or else get caught and sent back to the beginning. This, of all things, stumped me. Getting caught is basically a game over as the strangers are much faster than you, and they often cover their lanterns, so not only can you only see 2 feet in front of you, you can barely see them. The most successful of games know what they are and what they aren't, something Outer Wilds clearly understood given its removal of certain ubiquitous mechanics. And what it is not is a stealth game. Now I admit, this is 100% a skill issue. I sucked at this particular part a lot, but I do think it's strange that it was added in the first place. I'm not completely against the idea, but I don't really think of Outer Wilds as a game that would utilize stealth mechanics, having to hide in corners or wait for enemies to pass so I can move to the next floor of the house. Still, assuming you make it to the bottom, you get the last set of reels and we can finally talk about what's really going on here. The story slides show that the strangers, like the Nomai, also picked up the signal from the Eye of the Universe and decided to head there right away. They seem to be a very hasty species, one that doesn't think too far ahead. This is likely on account of them using a device called a vision torch, which lets them see into the future, so perhaps using this device too much developed a weakness in the species. I say that as their grand plan was to build the ship we're currently inside and take it to our solar system. But in doing so, they razed their entire home planet, turning it into nothing but rock. When they got to the solar system, they scanned the marking of the eye using their vision torch, and what they saw wasn't good. They had visions of the entire universe being destroyed. It would be the end of everything if they touched it. This put the strangers in panic mode. They immediately burned down any building that seemed to worship or study the eye, which is why the church-looking building on the ship looks burned. The strangers then created a device that would then block the eye's signal so it can never be received again. But that leaves them with the obvious problem. They just destroyed their home planet to get here, so where did they go now? That's what they were trying to figure out as well, and so decided to create the dream world. This dream realm is their home away from home. Literally, it's modeled after their home planet. It's like the Outer Wilds equivalent of the Matrix. Stay on the ship and live in a place that's not yours, or live in the fake stream of code modeled after your homeland. Not being able to see your home again while being forced to stay inside a digitized world likely does a number on your psyche. Which could be why one of the members decided to remove the signal blocking the eye. This prisoner believed that his people should have went after the eye instead of hiding from it. But he was quickly found out and put in the underground vault, which we saw at the beginning, never to be heard from again. There are a few deeply unsettling feelings that come from this news. One, just how depressing the outline of the story is. A species who were excited by the prospect of a new discovery naively destroyed their home only to realize their discovery was a ruse. The eye was not the wondrous and beautiful artifact they thought it to be, but rather a universe-killing machine that would end all life. They were advanced enough to learn the eye's true secret, but now they're in a situation where they know too much. This is a threat to the entire universe. Everything is at risk here. But what do you do with that kind of information? The strangers must have seen themselves as the universe's protectors, given the signal blocker they constructed to prevent anyone from making the same mistake as them. But they also had to come to terms with their own mistake and figure out how to carry on without their home. The dream realm is both a comfort and a crutch. It's nice that the strangers were able to live on their home world again, but they became so addicted to the world that they saw no reason to continue living in the real world. According to the Sun Station, the last command it received was 281,042 years ago, which is assumed to be when the ghost matter hit the solar system and killed off the Nomai. But the strangers came before them, so they've been here for close to 300,000 years. I can't imagine how that must feel to live in the same place for that long. I mean, think of the prisoner too. While their real body is likely long gone, they too are in the dream stuck in this solitary confinement. The other unsettling part is that this prisoner started the butterfly effect that would lead to the death of the Nomai. The Nomai came to this solar system because they got a brief signal from the eye. This brief moment was thanks to the prisoner deactivating the signal blocker. So everything we've learned about the Nomai, their creations and their discoveries can be attributed to this very moment. Again, I can't imagine how this feels. I know he wasn't the cause of their deaths, but that's how butterfly effects work. The smallest decisions can create the most drastic of outcomes. But all this talk about the prisoner and we still haven't found a way to open the vault. Well, the other set of reels we find within the archive solves this problem. These reels to me always felt like PSA safety videos, letting those in the dream know how it operates. The slides mention all these quirks of the dream, like how dropping your lantern and moving away from it lets you see through the illusion. Once again, bringing up the sheer genius of the puzzles, The solution comes from reverse engineering the video and doing explicitly what it says not to. For instance, dropping the lantern will let you see the invisible walkways that you'll have to line up in order to cross. It is such a cool idea, and harkens back to our conversation regarding the ship log. There are dozens of reels in these archives, but the game only gives you access to 2 at a time, so they have to be relevant somehow. Once you've gone against the reels, you can open the vault and greet the prisoner. The prisoner is still alive. Well, at least in the dream, anyway. Like Solanum, we aren't able to communicate with them directly, so we have to find a workaround. We also don't have a translator capable of deciphering their language, so our best choice is to beam each other with the vision torch. They show us a complete and chronological timeline of events in case you were still confused, and we show them what happened after they shut themselves off from the world. The prisoner's only response is a loud scream before leaving the vault and walking into the water, finally letting themselves pass on. It's been widely speculated what this scream meant. Many see it as a cry of sadness, that they were responsible for killing the Nomai, but others see it as a sigh of relief. Seeing as the vision torch has another vision, I'm inclined to believe the latter. The prisoner knew what he did was right in his eyes. He wanted to pursue the Eye, as he felt like his species had changed after learning this knowledge. They tried to hide from the world and act as if they didn't just discover a way to destroy the universe. The prisoner wanted to bring back that sense of discovery that the species lost when they learned all this info. But this decision led them to a potential eternity of seclusion. Even if you disagree with his decision, that's a fate that no one should have to suffer. Releasing him finally lets him pass on, and while there is no indication of them being religious, I'd like to hope that he was able to see his people again. On a podcast with NoClip, Alex again talked about the DLC, and explains that one of his ideas was to make the reveal of the strangers be the last thing the player encounter. The twist was going to be that they were all dead and in the Matrix. They changed this pretty early on because they knew players would hear about a secret digital world and want to explore that instead of staying on the ship, something I definitely agree with. But I find that this reveal worked in its own way. The player will easily recognize that the species lives on the ship and will naturally question why one of them is empty. It's both terrifying and hopeful. There is a hope that, like Solanum, one of their species managed to make it, but an initial feeling of unease that there is someone who wants to kill us out there stalking the ship. It's brilliant, and I find that it leads to a more satisfying conclusion. The team always wanted to integrate the DLC into the game naturally, so making a plot that fits seamlessly into the story was the right choice, as now it's just another curiosity, another piece to the puzzle. It lets the base game exist unchanged while also letting the DLC expand its original reach without letting each other conflict. The strangers were also designed to be opposites to the Nomai, and seeing this difference provides a unique perspective on the matter at hand. The Nomai wanted to seek out the Eye of the Universe even though they didn't understand its goal, but the strangers were uniquely able to learn its purpose and chose not to invoke it. While pursuing the Eye, the Nomai established themselves throughout the solar system while the strangers kept to themselves. And in pursuit of this goal, one respected the planets and its life it provided, while the other destroyed their homeworld and its life in the process. Both are foils for each other, completely opposite in almost every way, with the only detail they share being that they are both lost to time. Generations of species left to wither and rot as the world continues to move ever forward. And now it's time for the new generation to take up the mantle and find the Eye. With the ship log filled, the mysteries discovered, and the universe thoroughly explored, we only have one thing left to do: find the Eye of the Universe. To do so, we must invoke the final solution. A tower on Ash Twin has 2 warp cores. This would, in theory, take you to both the Hourglass Twins, but since we're already on Ash Twin, the other takes you to the core of the Ash Twin project. At the center is an advanced warp core, the device that powers the time loop. Removing this and dying kills you permanently. What you're meant to do is to take this to the vessel in Dark Bramble, swap out the core, and plug in the coordinates. Welcome to the Eye of the Universe. In retrospect, it's no wonder no one found it. That large orange dot in the background is the sun. At this distance, it looks like any other star in the galaxy. Stepping through the warp core takes us to the surface. The planet's surface is bombarded with lightning strikes, and the ambient noise it gives off is both deafening and horrifying. We managed to arrive at the observatory. All the text that was previously written here has been changed to fit the new discoveries we made. This leads to the idea that everything we see from here on out is a manifestation of our memories. It wouldn't make sense for the eye to have its own observatory that's explicitly based on ours. It seems like the eye doesn't have a foundation, unlike the other planets whose surface is defined and set in stone, like the large waters of Giant's Deep. The eye seems to conform itself to the individual who enters it. At the top is what seems to be our universe. Observing it takes you to a forest filled with different stars, planets, and galaxies, all eventually fizzling into nothing. The world is crumbling around us. Who knows, time is rather strange here, so maybe the world is already gone and these galaxies are dying in real time. The long dead lights of the galaxies block our vision, leaving with us just a lonely campfire. Next to it is Esker, one of the members of the Outer Wilds Ventures. He wants us to go find the rest of the crew while he sits and enjoys the fire. Each of these locations is loosely related to the individuals the instruments belong to. Rybek's banjo could be found in a broken down ruin, as he was sent to investigate the ancient ruins of the Nomai on Brittle Hollow. Church drums are found floating in space as he was asked to update the star charts. Gabro's flute is lying near a hammock near the top of a tree, reflecting the same carefree attitude of its owner. And Feldspar's harmonica has you getting jump scared by an anglerfish, because of course it does. If you manage to land on the Quantum Moon and complete the DLC, then Solanum and the Prisoner will join too. Solanum's piano was found by taking a Nomai ship and warping into space, just like the Nomai warped to our solar system. The Nomai skeletons are also standing on each other's shoulders to reach a mysterious light in the sky, reinforcing the theme of the generations passing the torch down to each other and how the Nomai had an innate sense of curiosity regarding the mysteries of the universe. And finally, the Prisoner is found buried underground, meant to be forgotten, just like them. Again, it's another example of the eye conjuring up images and moments from our memories, even down to the aspects of the people we meet on our journey. Once everyone has been gathered, you can begin the music. The last part I can't play in full because it's extremely loud and I know some of you sleep to these videos. But jumping into the orb creates a new universe. We have created our own Big Bang. Just as the strangers saw in their vision, the universe was destroyed. But all hope is not lost, as a post-credit cutscene reveals that 14 billion years later, the world has given birth to new life. Planets and species are thriving once again, and the world is back to normal, thus ending the Outer Wilds. This last 30 minutes of the game is so beautifully made. From the landing to the explosion, I loved every minute of it. Ever since release, lots of discussion has been centered around the eye and its true purpose. We know what its end goal is, but similar to what Solanum posed, why is the real question. Does the eye send out this signal when it recognizes the end of the universe, or does it always send out these signals? Would the universe have been born anew if we didn't touch the eye, or is that explicitly required? If not, what would happen if the universe just died? Would the eye still remain, drifting away into the nothingness of space? Similarly, does the eye being older than the universe imply that we aren't the first universe? That we're just one along in the chain, and that 14 billion years ago there was another universe that exploded and gave birth to this one? Equally, does that mean our own universe was created this way, and that we too have our own eye somewhere in the galaxy? I don't know, that's a pretty loaded question to have in a mediocre video like this, but it's cool to think about, if a little existential. There are no answers to these questions, which solidifies a feeling I've had since achieving this, that the game is about the journey and not the destination. When everyone is gathered, you can briefly speak to them before the music begins. Each of their comments perfectly explains the game's message. Even after all our hard work, we still couldn't stop what was coming. We couldn't stop the time loop, the supernova, and now we just destroyed the universe. It seems rather nihilistic, but there's a hint of optimism that comes from the crew. Everyone recognizes that this is the end, but they also realize that they got to have a lot of fun along the way. Feldspar got to see a lot of new beasties. Esker was just glad to be with everyone again. Church got to explore the stars. Ryback learned about the Nomai's history. Gabbro felt like he had helped get us to this moment. And Solanum and the prisoner fulfilled their species' wishes, even if it did require the prisoner to betray his people. The world was going to end no matter what. Technically, our world was already gone, but there's no point in stopping the inevitable, so it's best to think about what happened in the meantime. Ryback's other comment is one of my favorites, which is that the past is the past, but that's okay. The past may be behind us, but it's never truly gone, as that future is built on the actions of the past. Neil Armstrong may have been the first man on the moon, but without the hard work of those behind the scenes and thousands of years of evolution and human curiosity, he would have never been there to achieve it. As he said himself, it was one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. It's a wonderful look at the drive of humanity, while also providing a positive perspective on death. The song that's performed is the one heard by all the members on their respective planets and is the game's main theme. It feels like we've come full circle. The main theme is the first thing you hear when you enter the world, and it's the last thing you'll hear when you leave. Choosing music to send us off, though, feels like it was due to its history as the most understood language. I went to a culture festival a few years ago. Pretty much no one knew each other except those they brought with them, and most probably weren't even a part of the culture they were celebrating. And yet late into the night, the band played a song that connected everyone. What started as 3 friends way too drunk to be moving turned into a spiral of people holding hands and dancing. No one knew each other, but you'd think they were family. Music brings people together. A simple tune can convey an emotion without even a word being spoken. And here we are, 8 people from different species and cultures, all with different experiences and views, enjoying the final moments of the world together. Sharing one last conversation, one last laugh, one last song, one last marshmallow before the end. This to me is what Outer Wilds is all about. To the universe, our life is meaningless, a small blip in time. To us, it's everything. Our whole lives were spent doing something. The ending isn't important, it's the journey. The exploration, the discovery, the curiosity, and not just of this world, but of our own. Life is about experiencing things, but while you're speeding through life, remember to take things slow. Be present in the world and experience the life that you've been given, and make sure to smell the pine trees a little. Outer Wilds wants you to not fear death. It wants you to recognize that we can't win against it, so instead of fighting back, use the time you have left to enjoy your life, because you never know when it will end. You might have 50 years left, maybe you'll have 10, or maybe 1, or maybe just 22 minutes. Regardless of how long you got, you have to make the most of it. No matter how long you have, you should feel satisfied at the end that you gave it your all, whatever that all may be. It's why rushing through the game just to get to the end is the wrong way to play. It's all about the journey, learning new planets, meeting new people, uncovering new discoveries, and finally solving that puzzle that gave you so much trouble. Outer Wilds is about these moments, because eventually that journey will come to a close. Bringing about the end of the universe is not what you want it to happen, but you should feel satisfied with your playthrough by the end. That you explored everything you wanted and had a good time. The universe dying is scary, but we also know that it will give birth to something new. Plus, our solar system should have been gone a long time ago. Our world really ended 400 years ago. Hell, I'd argue the universe is at its end too. All across the solar system are numerous supernovas, and the last time I checked, we don't see too many of them from Earth, especially not at this frequency. It feels like both the solar system and the universe are on its last legs, so it's only right that we give it a proper send-off. We might not have a home to go back to, but we can provide a new home to a future species. There is always life in death. When one door closes, another opens, and when one universe dies, another will take its place. Such is the way of life. Outer Wilds was an absolutely fantastic experience. I held off on playing this game for years because I wanted this to be my first experience with the game, and it didn't disappoint. The exploration was top-notch, some of the most original and creative content I've seen from a game in years. The puzzle design was exceptional and much more than just a simple solution, and the curiosity of seeing what was out there in the universe was all I needed to continue playing, especially as these curiosities developed into much more complicated mysteries. Still, it's going to be hard to see it go. I said at the beginning of this video that Outer Wilds is a game you can only play once. I had heard this so many times that it was all I could think about. Why? What does that mean? As I played, I initially thought that it was referring to the planets, how the mystery of what each planet is about and how they interact with the solar system will be ruined, and that you'll never get that unique feeling of landing on a new planet again. This is still true, but what I didn't expect was for this message to be literal. 99% of Outer Wilds is spent finding the final solution. The last 1% is enacting that solution. All you need to beat Outer Wilds are those 3 steps: the warp core from Ash Twin, the location of the vessel, and the coordinates. Remember that, and you'll never be able to play this game again. Other games can still be replayable as there are alternative options left unchosen or gameplay systems to engage with. But Outer Wilds doesn't have that. It removed all these systems that the player could explore because they're curious, and that curiosity leads you to this solution. You could start up a new game on a fresh save file and do this on your first run. There's even an achievement for it. Playing this game with this knowledge is almost like lying to yourself. The point is to explore and to find the mysteries of the universe, and yet you have the solution to do so right in front of you. So why wait? Why delay the inevitable like the time loop did to the solar system? So I had to say goodbye to not only the universe, but to my memories. The memories I made throughout this playthrough. The successes, the failures, the scares and dares. Outer Wilds is a game about exploring the unknown, starting completely from scratch and then finding out what to do on your own. That's why starting another playthrough just doesn't feel the same, as by having that prior knowledge you ruin a core part of the game. It's rather fitting that a game about the end of the universe and how we only have one chance to live the life we want is inside a game that can only be played once. But there is a silver lining to be found here, as while I may have been born too late to explore our planet and too early to explore the solar system, I was born at just the right time to explore the Outer Wilds. Thanks for watching. Thank you all for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed. A lot of you requested this over the past couple years, so I'm glad I could finally get to this. As I said in the last video, the next couple months are pretty packed with new videos, including Elden Ring's DLC, Stalker, and Metro. All progress on any video will be relayed via the community tab, so make sure to check periodically so you don't miss out on what's next. As always, like the video if you enjoy and subscribe if you're new for more content like this. Thank you to my returning viewers for coming back to another video, and take care everyone. Goodbye.